Greetings gamers! In this video I'm going to go over the TzHaar Collection Log section in the Collection Log. Now this is a section that hasn't been completed by many, including myself, and the goal of this video is to go over some different methods you can use, some requiring alts, some requiring just yourself, some being more AFK, and others being more supply intensive. Now it'll be your decision based on your supplies, your money, or your GP situation on what method you would prefer using, depending on if you want to speed it up or if you want to slow it down and save money. Now, one thing to note about this section is each boss has a different drop table, and combined together they give you all the items. So I'm going to go over that right now. So as I mentioned earlier, there's different drops for each different monster. So I'm going to categorize the monsters in 4 different types. We have the melee, the ranger, the mage, and the lawyer. Now the melee has the armor set on the drop table, and also has 2 additional uniques, which is the shield and the albemarle. The ranger has those little rings that you throw, and the 2 other melee weapons. And the major has a staff, which is the rare staff that is one of the harder ones. It's actually 1 in 4,000. And all 3 of them, they share a common drop, which is the obby cape. And so I won't consider that one as in one of these 3. The lure, however, has nothing on its drop table that is in the collection log, but it still has an advantage. And the reason for it is because, similar to the major, if you attack the lure or the major, all monsters in a radius around that NPC is going to get aggressive to you immediately. Now this can be used in your advantage. If, for example, you're doing barrage method, you can tag the lure or the major, and that'll help you tag more monsters at the same time, which is definitely beneficial in that sense, and I'll show you examples of that in the future. In terms of drop rates, if you do the math with the coupon problem, you can solve for how many kills you need to kill on each monster to complete the collection log. Now for the melee, you have to kill 3,663 meleers to complete all the items, and that's more specifically just the armor set. For the ranger, you need to kill 939 of them, which is a lot less than the other 2. And for the major, you have to kill 4,000. The reason for that is to hit drop rate on the staff. And among all those kills, you'll guarantee to get the cape along the way. So that is the drop rates, and now I'm going to go over some examples. The first setup is going to be the dinny method. Now the requirement for this method is you need to have the diary cape or a house teleport, but the diary cape is significantly faster, and a Narda teleport with desert elites completed. The requirements are quite steep, and it's not actually the best method. However, this does give you attack XP, and it doesn't cost much supplies besides super combats. The divines is optional. I don't use divines personally just because I prefer chugging super combats and saving the shards for the crystal chests in the future. However, if you have more money or you're a normie, feel free to use divines. It's definitely worth the extra money. This method is quite simple. All you do is you run in with your dinny B, you spec twice, and you try to get as many targets as possible. Your first spec typically will hit less monsters, but your second spec will hit more as all the aggressive monsters start running towards you. You want to repot or sip your divines every 5 minutes and maintain the highest stats as possible. I usually pot every 3 levels that I go down with regular super combats. However, you could just sip divines every 5 minutes and not have to worry about that. There's not much more to say about this method, to be honest. You just run in dinny B spec. You can hold the number 9 on your keyboard, and you can also use the custom menu entry swapper to make the Narda teleport and the teleport option on the cape a left click option. That'll make it a lot easier. You can also hold a heavy object on the number 9 on your keyboard, and that would result in you only needing 1 hand for this method, which is really nice if you're watching movies, by the way. But it's not the fastest. The way I calculate what method is better than others is based on the hit points XP, because that's an indication of how much damage you're dealing per hour, as 1.33 hit points XP is equivalent to 1 damage. So for this example, you can see you're averaging around 65 to 70k hit points XP per hour, which is still really good. However, you'll see the next 2 methods are significantly better. This here's the mage barrage setup without any alts. Now this method is significantly more expensive as you require runes to cast ice barrage. However, it's much faster than the dinny B method, so it's up to you if it's worth saving the time. I like to bring a dinny B when doing this method because you can use the dinny spec to attack multiple monsters at once. The only difference here you can make is you can switch the book and the eternal boots for something more tankier or giving more prayer, like devout boots or guardian boots. And also you can switch the trident for something a little faster, like an MSB or maybe even a blowpipe. And likewise for the ring slot, there's a lot of different options you can have. With the no alt method, I like bringing an endurance ring because you do use run energy. However, you can definitely bring something else like a suffering for the extra prayer and defense, or you can even bring the new spec ring from Tombs of Amasket, and that'll let you do more dinny specs, which is definitely useful. So for this method, it's quite self-explanatory. The way you want to tag all the TzHaar monsters is by tagging the lures that I mentioned earlier, and also the majors. That will bring an aggression timer to all the monsters around you. They're going to start attacking you automatically. You can also stack them up by moving 2 tiles west and coming back, or north and coming back, or south and coming back. In terms of these tiles that I have marked 3, and that's where you want to have the monsters stand. I'm going to put these tile markers in the description so you can upload them onto your client for RuneLite. But if you don't want to do that, you can definitely find it yourself. It's on the east side where the from Inferno entrance, northeast. Really close to the bank. The bank is northeast of me, actually. And you see, very self-explanatory, you barrage the clump. If your health goes low, you can use a blood barrage, which is the reason why you bring the soul runes. And if you have a Kodai, of course, you save water runes. And if you tag the lures, you can see the respawn timers, so you know when to attack them back. The best way to increase your XP per hour in this method is really tagging at the good time. So you only want to tag the lures when there's other monsters around it, like in this case. You see I just aggroed 2 new ones in the clump. Or 3, actually. So, very self-explanatory, not much to say here. The hit points XP per hour is almost 100k with this method, which is around 40% faster than the dinny method. Definitely worth the time save if you're willing to spend the extra runes. The only unfortunate thing is you don't really make your money back because the loot is not very great. But yeah, so that's the mage method. Now here it's a little different. It's essentially the same thing as the mage method. However, I have one alt helping me out. Now what the alt does is simply tags the lures. And as an Iron Man, you do not get loot if someone tags a monster, regardless if they splash. That was updated by Jagex to prevent alting. However, for TzHaars, it's a little loophole, because if you tag the lures, the Iron Man won't get the loot on the lure. However, there's no drops for the lures, so you don't really care. So all you do on your alt is tag the lures and clump them together, and you can dance to get them clumped up. If you bring 2 extra ults, you can even have the 2 ults dance and clump up further, which would be even better. But I'm not sure how much more that XP would rise. One thing to note about the main is you can either bring splash gear, but it actually doesn't really matter because you won't get kill credit anyways on the lures. So what you could do is bring a little bit of mage accuracy gear, like an occult and boots, and maybe even an ancestral piece. And that way you can kill the lures faster so they can respawn sooner and you can tag more. Another thing to note too is I use a dinny spec on my iron. The dinny spec is similar in DPS to the Nice Barrage, however it'll help you tag some of the closer ones. Like for example that mage that just spawned next to me. That one is important to tag because the mages are important to kill when doing this method as there's 0 time. And I'm using a spec ring for that reason. And not much more to say about this method. It's very, very good. You can see I'm getting around 115 to 120,000 hit points XP per hour, so it's around 20% faster than the no alt method. And the supply cost on your alt isn't that bad. All you need to bring is a bunch of brews and restores and maybe a couple staminas. For this method, you don't actually need to use staminas on your iron, which is cool. But for the no alt method, you do need to bring a couple staminas. Now, the way you would go forward with completing the collection log is you would do one of the 3 methods I previously mentioned until you complete both the melee section and the ranger section. Now, the ranger section is significantly easier, so chances are you're going to be doing the same method until you greenlog the melee section. Once you have the melee and the ranger section greenlog, chances are very probable that the only thing you're missing is the staff from the majors. And for that, you're going to do a different type of setup, where you're going to particularly only be killing the majors. So the best gear setup is actually equal in terms of max melee with rapier and blowpipe in max range. And that's ignoring Missouri and Torva, by the way, because I don't have that. But if you include Missouri, then obviously blowpipe is better. And if you include Torva, then the melee setup is better. However, you need to remember one thing. Blowpipe has a range attack, and so it's theoretically better than the melee setup, and that's because you lose less ticks, and also the overkill DPS is better. So I would recommend using blowpipe if you're a main account. However, if you're an Iron Man account, or if you don't like Zora for whatever reason, like myself, I'd recommend using the melee method. The DPS calculation difference I'm going to show you on screen right now between max melee without Torva and max range without Missouri and Vamps is very similar in DPS. However, as I mentioned earlier, range is better if you have the money or the Zora scales. So in terms of the major only killing method, it's very simple. I'm more stingy on my supplies, so I teleport every couple kills to not use too many prayer potions. However, you could decide to camp there non-stop and just run in circles. The best way I've found doing it without too much breaking my head, which is not necessarily required, you can find different ways if you prefer, is to just enter the room and run around the entire Inferno entrance and killing all the majors that I have tagged in yellow. And remember, when you tag the major, all other NPCs aggro you, so I'd recommend praying melee and rigor, and trying to look at your hit points and make sure you tele out or eat food if you fall low. There's not much more to say, honestly, about this method. It's quite easy. They only have 100 health, and according to the DPS calc, it takes around 10 seconds to kill each one with max melee or max range. And if you do the calculations in my example clip, in 3 minutes and 20 seconds, I killed 14 majors. So if you extrapolate that in terms of kills per hour, it's around 250 kills per hour, which means that doing this method, it'll take you around 16 hours to get the staff on drop rate. Now, albeit you'd likely have killed a couple majors before from the dinny and barrage method, as some majors get in the clump and you get extra kills, which is considered 0 time. But if you don't consider that 0 time, you'd have to spend 16 hours doing this method, which is really rough. And it costs a lot of Zora skills, which is why I don't think it's worth the time as an Iron Man to use a blowpipe here. One more thing to mention too, the expected completion for the TzHaar section is rated at around 40 hours. The only issue about this hour estimation is it varies greatly based on your RNG on the armor set or on the staff. If you end up spooning one or the other, it can save you tens of hours. But if you end up going dry on one or the other, then it can really hurt the amount of time you spend here. And so 40 hours is a very generous estimation that I've calculated. Now, on that note, I hope you enjoyed this video, this guide. I've seen a lot of questions on the Collection Log Discord regarding this method, and not a lot of people are aware of the different ways you can do it. The Iron Man skilling Discord does have a method where they do 2 alts, and they either do a barrage or a Sihali method. That is very interesting. I would love to try that method. However, I don't have 2 alts to do that. And even if I did, I don't really want to play 2 alts. I'm not a fan of playing on different accounts at the same time, which is why I'm not even sure if I'll do the alt method, even though I tried it for a couple hours and it was definitely good. But it's just too much. It's too much effort for me to do, and I'd rather like use my second monitor to play on one account and also watch maybe Netflix or YouTube on the side. But on that note, good luck on the collection log grind. Make sure you leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what other guides you'd like to see in the future, and take care.